Hello and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Ainol Fitri bin Muhammad Jinih. So for today, I'm going to explain the introductions of the unconscious bias. We live in the world that's full of stereotypes. A stereotype is a commonly held but fixed and overly simplistic things or concept of a specific types of persons or thing. Gender stereotypes abound, such as women are good caregivers and men are good at fixing things. Race stereotypes can exist, such as African Americans are poor and Asian Americans are good at maths. Stereotypes may appear insignificant, but they become problematic when we automatically associate people with certain stereotypes. Our brain makes these associations quickly, which can lead to unconscious bias. Following the incident in which two black men were arrested at one of their locations, Starbucks closed more than 8,000 stores across the United States in 2019 for racial bias training. Not only that, in 2021, the murder of George Floyd sparked a wave of increased corporate sensitivity to issues of racism and other forms of unconscious bias. Since then, unconscious bias training has become the primary types of diversity, equity, and inclusion's DEI program in corporate America. The question is, what is unconscious bias? Unconscious bias is defined as prejudice in favor of or against one thing, persons, or group in comparison to another, usually in an unfair way. Unconscious bias can manifest itself in a variety of ways, including how we judge and evaluate others, as well as how we treat members of different groups. There are many different types of unconscious bias, but they can all be classified as individual bias or bias in how an individual thinks or behaves. Individual bias can be conscious or unconscious. That is, the person exhibiting the bias may or may not be aware that their thoughts or actions are biased. There are many examples of unconscious bias, such as an executive who is uncomfortable mentoring a woman employee, a recruiter who does not believe candidates from a community college are worth to be interviewed, a manager who tends to assign better projects to younger reports, an employee who uses racial slurs against a co-worker. All of this action shows the exact reality of unconscious bias.
Assalamualaikum Madam Zarina and fellow classmates. I'm Uswatul Hasanah Binti Zainudin, and today I will explain about types and the importance of unconscious bias in recruitment and selection. There are 9 types of unconscious bias, such as affinity bias, appearance bias, confirmation bias, attribution bias, gender bias, age bias, authority bias, the halo effect, and the horn effect. Therefore, I will explain one by one. First and foremost, affinity bias. We like people who are like ourselves in appearance, background, or belief. That's affinity bias. We unknowingly reject individuals who don't share our interests out of a desire to belong. This might lead to a room full of people who think and believe the same, limiting new ideas and viewpoints. Organization, teams, and people suffer, which affects their leadership abilities. Secondly, appearance bias. Not often is the person's appearance all that counts. Some appearance prejudice examples, attractive or charming people are treated more good. Then, weight discrimination occurs when a person's weight is considered while making a decision. Last is height bias. Taller people are perceived as more authoritative and leadership-like according to studies. Thirdly, confirmation bias. We are ideals and principles. We seek for and interpret fresh facts to confirm our prior notions. Confirmation bias may also affect employment decisions. For instance, a company marketing department feels confident about a new service. The team members do market research. The service may not be as profitable as expected, but researchers view the data as an anomaly. They solely include research supporting the team beliefs. The team search for signals that the new service will be a success, not every bit of information. Next, attribution bias. Attribution bias links people's actions to irrelevant or wrong traits. This bias causes us to develop judgments about events or behavior without all the facts. We may assume they are irresponsible, disinterested in their job, or both due to attribution bias. Other than that, gender bias, tradition, morality, social traditions, or culture may lead to inadvertent gender discrimination. Unintentional unconscious gender bias favors men, according to studies. Even when two job candidates have similar histories, men are often promoted. Also, the gender wage disparity. In 2021, women will earn 82 cents for every man's dollar. Meanwhile, age bias. Age discrimination occurs when we make quick judgments based on someone's age. Youth may be connected with lack of knowledge, or older folks are perceived as antiquated or behind the times since they are more experienced and smart. Subsequently, authority bias. Authoritative bias is the tendency to give authority figures more heavy. Authority bias may make people see those in powerful positions more favorably. From this point, the halo effect also one of it. A halo effect refers to the tendency to use a person's overall excellent impression to alter other perceptions about their character. The halo effect often arises after we make an initial judgment about someone. If we have a good first impression about someone, we may assume they are intelligent, socially adept, and generous. Lastly, the horn effect. Halo and horn effects are related. The horn impact is negative. This creates a negative impression about the person's character. Snappy coworkers may alter our views of them in various ways. It is simpler to call someone nasty and unpleasant than to admit they were having a poor day. Next, I will explain about the importance of unconscious bias in recruitment and selection. Why is it important to think about unconscious bias? Workplace and organizations may be affected. It may lead to prejudice and poor selection making. Unconscious prejudice may prevent a diverse and inclusive workplace. Prejudice affect hiring, mentoring, and promotions. This may hinder women's selection and promotion to high-level management and leadership roles. An organization policy frameworks and works practices may include unconscious prejudice. It may also be the result of business norms such as flexible work practices, which allow employees to address family and other needs. Other employees may regard flexibility as laziness and not doing their part, and flexible workers may be considered as a financial loss for an organization. This is an intentional bias among employees. Thank you.
Hello there, Assalamualaikum. My name is Siti Munirah Qayyimah Binti Norsyahidzan. I will be presenting the impact of unconscious bias in the recruitment process. In the hiring process, unconscious bias can unknowingly fall into the recruiter during the resume screening phase, which starts with job analysis, recruitment, job application, testing, and finally the decision phase that may affect the recruiter decision making. Even worse, the impact is a long-term effect that could widespread to a large number of people, where if the decision were made is wrong, it could affect the society, employee, and the organization itself. The first impact of biased hiring decision on the organization is less diverse teams, which it will reduce the business productivity. When the recruiter favors only one gender over another, or when all the candidate with more working experience is preferred over younger candidate, the working teams may have been less innovative or creative in completing the project because all of the employees have similar perspective. As a result, the project that they are working on may not meet the criteria, which can potentially decrease the organization revenue. Thus, the organization will perform better if the organization have greater ethnic and gender diversity. Team members with diverse background, ethnicity, and experience easily generate ideas and solve problems. This may result in more extensively evaluated outcomes because the process of making the project a success is from combining diverse group of thinkers. Research has shown that a diverse board of directors is 43% more likely to make above average profit. We must remember that all people are different and different minds offer unique and fresh perspective in productive work environment. The second impact is that recruiter may hire unqualified and unskilled candidates. Instead of focusing on the candidate's knowledge, skill, ability, and the qualification, the recruiter may unconsciously select candidates based on how attractive they appear. The biased decision making will disregard the capabilities of candidates who may lack adequate qualification and skill for the job. They will ultimately burden the organization teamwork and productivity as well as the candidate's motivation because the candidate will be unable to do the duty successfully. As a result, the candidate will become disengaged and resentful over their performance. This situation may increase staff turnover and absence. At the end, the organization will bear the consequences of losing an employee and having a low business potential. It also increases the company cost for hiring more candidates. The worst part, if an organization is lack of top talent, the company is not seen as competitive in the marketplace because the employee have no match with other developed and successful company. The third impact is the working environment could be depressing and dangerous as a result of unfair discrimination. Any strong preferential bias can lead to workplace bullying, unlawful harassment, and discrimination, which it will be putting the organization at risk of reputational harm and any associated financial consequences. Employee mental health may be affected and they may be discouraged from performing their duties because their workplace has a biased attitude that is being underestimated. Hence, the organization must be aware of this issue because it can impair work performance and business productivity. Additionally, the biased decision will also affect the society. For example, less job opportunity. It will be a massive loss for the organization if the qualified candidate that not get hired have no chance to contribute their capabilities and skill for the company development. As a whole, if unconscious bias training is lacking among employer and employee, it could impact all the business performance starting from the productivity, cost of the training, and the organizational environment. The company image and reputation could be bad if they are practicing bias. Not just that, the company could lose $millions if their training were not effective. As mentioned in the article, it is estimated that Starbucks lost more than 16 million in revenue when they closed their stores for unconscious bias training. With that amount of money, unconscious bias training shows that this unconscious bias is crucial for all the organization to be aware of it. That is all from me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nursyafira Binti Yahya, and I'll present about the solution to overcome this unconscious hiring bias. First, acknowledge unconscious bias. Unconscious bias are implicit in the sense that they are not intentional and unconscious because we are not aware of our specific bias. But it is a fact that everyone has unconscious bias, and acknowledge and accepting that the fact is necessary before we can do the deeper work to overcome them. Secondly, be transparent about hiring process. This transparency will assure employees that this process are not biased toward the hiring based on gender, age, race, sexual orientation, or other factor. If the company proactively recruiting professionals from diverse background and experience, being transparent about it will build employees' trust in the hiring process. Third, refine job description. Different words attract different candidates. Therefore, it is essential to choose the right word while writing job description. Even before the candidate enter the interview, job description operates as a major filter influencing both the hiring process and the candidate perception of the companies. While writing the job description, pay attention to making them standardized, job role specific, and inclusive of supporting all forms of diversity. Next, improve interview process. While conducting an interview, It is important to stick to a structured process so that everyone answers the same standardized question. This allows to compare candidate abilities without being influenced by a surface of characteristics. It is also helpful to ask behavioral questions to see how candidates have reacted in the past to assess possible future situations. Moreover, make meeting inclusive. Being inclusive can mean doing things as simple as valuing others' time. Ensure equal amount of interaction with each employee. Make sure all the employees feel fully listened to and respond constructively to comments that the companies might disagree with. Lastly, do employee survey. Include questions about racial bias on anonymous employee survey. Also can be considered surveying former employees about racial bias to understand what issue they might have faced and what step might help to keep them at the organization.
In conclusions, unconscious bias will create unhealthy working environment in any organizations. As explained before, there are many types of unconscious bias exist in today's working environment, such as affinity bias, appearance bias, gender bias, age bias, confirmations bias, attribution bias, authority bias, the halo effect, and the horn effect. Without we all aware that these actions of bias really happen in today's staffing and recruitment. Due to that, we have to take concerns on what is happening around us, since it will bring major impact on workplace and organizations such as less diverse team, unqualified and unskilled candidate, depressing and unsafe working environment, and many more. All these impacts not only will demotivate the employees, but also will bring down the organization's reputations. That is why it is very important for everyone in the organizations to take immediate and effective actions to counter these habits from keep happening. Do remember that a good organization should assure their employees in a better and comfortable conditions in the workplace. Therefore, this bias action should be addressed before it becomes even worse, so that it can create a healthy and fair in staffing and recruitment. I think that's all from our group, and I hope everyone can learn something from our presentations on the chosen current issues. Together, we fight unconscious bias. That's all from me. Thank you.